You're watching The Blueprint.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Blueprint podcast. Today we have Steve Young.
What's up?
NFL Hall of Famer, 3-time Super Bowl champion, private equity partner, and flag football coach with us today in the high school. So yeah, we wanted to touch today a little bit on leadership and what your personal philosophy for leadership is, and how did that change from your days playing in the NFL or even in college to now your days in private equity?
Well, it's changed over the years as you mature. I think when you're younger, you're more desperate and you don't have as many gears to use. Trying to think of a good analogy where, as I've aged, I've realized that I can't be as desperate to lead, that I need to lead in a more authentic way. And that really asks that I get to know the people I'm hoping to follow my leadership, and then recognize that I really don't want the leader-follower paradigm. I'd rather have a collective of like-minded people, looking for a direction, and then somebody that, kind of sets a direction for everybody. That way, the dynamic is more everybody's in all the time. Like, it's so hard to get people to do what you want to. It's really easy to get them to do what they want to. And I think that you've got to figure out how to align what they want to do with what you want to get accomplished. And I think that when I'm younger, I didn't know all that. I just needed to score touchdowns. I needed people to go, and I needed you to follow, and I needed you to. So what I'll say is, in leadership, there's what I'll call, less mature leadership, which would be more leader and follower. And, and then a more mature leadership is when you leave the leadership paradigm. You become kind of a collective mindset of creating a direction that everybody can invest in. And then leadership becomes more about making sure that you've, charting the right path, like everyone's kind of bought into. So I think in many ways, it's harder to lead more maturely. It's easier to have a big stick and just hit people, analogy, not metaphor, not for sure. But I would say that's the big difference in and then when it comes to business versus football, really so much of it is very similar. It's humans, right? And you want humans to be incented and inspired and believe in a cause. And I always thought quarterbacking was 3/4 psychology, and the other quarter was throwing the ball. So there's similarities, a lot of them.
So Steve, I want to ask you about really what it was when you were playing football. What I want to ask you is, when you're entering new organizations, new businesses, new teams, you had to do this plenty of times, from your times at BYU, then into the USFL, then NFL. What's the key to earning people's respect and quickly becoming a leader when you're coming in as relatively unexperienced and young compared to the veterans that might be established there already? And I also want to ask you, what is your internal dialogue going into these scenarios?
Yeah, so the most important thing is that you're competent, right? In other words, if you want people's respect for a job, then you got to be able to do the job. Now, doing the job and getting the respect for getting it done is one thing. Getting the respect as a human being is a different thing. Like, I respect you're a great player, but you're a crappy person. And that's not the inspiration you're looking for. So I think that you're looking for two things. You're looking for competency. Look, I'm respected because I can do the job. And secondly, I have the vulnerability, I would call it, to, you could call it self-deprecation. You could call it just awareness that, I want to make sure that people know that I'm vulnerable and that I make mistakes and that I'll own them, and that, I'm not a finger pointer. I'm not somebody that's going to get under the microscope and everyone's just clamoring at me and then I start shooting fingers out at everybody. And so that's the other part of the respect. There's two sides. Now, I can be an amazing accountable leader, but I'm not competent. So it's like, they have to go together. And I think through the years, you asked me about at the beginning when you're really not, you don't know that you're competent. I call it fake it till you make it. Like, in other words, nobody's born accomplished. You have to start, crawling, then you walk, and then you run. But yet, in, anything you do in your life, you can't crawl around very long. People aren't going to put up with it, right? So you have to act like you're running. But then you're running, you're like, I don't even know what I'm doing, And I think there's a little bit of that. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm figuring it out every day. And if anybody asks, I know what I'm doing. Like there's a little bit of, and I say fake it till you make it. I don't really mean all of that, but I mean some of it. That I'm aspirational. I'm going to be great. Mm-hmm. I'm not great today. I'm not going to try to say I'm great already, but I'm going to be great at this. So jump in with me. Mm-hmm. See if you can get some people to follow that.
Great. So you kind of talked about like the different forms of leadership, kind of like mature versus less mature, you put it, or like more passive versus more like authoritative. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with like in high performance setting and high performers that might be difficult or have developed an ego, but are still critical to the success of the team or the company, whatever that might be? How do you approach that?
Well, I wouldn't. I think I wouldn't say, authoritarian and passive. I would say authoritarian and athletic, because in my mind, the harder job is to not just stand back, but be athletic around you would say the different personalities. Let's say there's somebody that has a huge ego that, doesn't want to be told and doesn't want to, but yet is very confident, like someone who can really get it done, right? So with different characters. And I think there has to be a baseline of willingness to subsume yourself and your ego and your career and your self-interest. There has to be a baseline of your willingness to subsume some of it for the greater good. And I think I've seen that where people won't meet the minimum despite how great they are. I would think that they're not worth it, because in the end, a sum of the parts is never going to be as good as the whole. Like, you have to have, there's this abundance, I'll call it, in a great team, that they're better than all the individual parts. They come together and they're actually tougher to beat, and they're champions, because not necessarily because they have all this talent, but how they have brought it together. When I say baseline or a minimum, it just needs to have, and a lot of guys that have huge egos or that are not really that are not aware about that, mostly because no one's ever kind of taken the time to tell them. Like, they've been so great for so long, and everyone just told them how great they were. And no one's ever said, hey, you know what? You're great, but you're not great at this. And then people who want to be great, generally, if you say it in the right way, like, you're great at this, but to be really great, you got to be great at this as well. And you're not great at this. And I know you want to be great, and you kind of get them to buy into, well, I'm going to be great at everything. Well, I like that idea. So there's another piece of the puzzle, this selflessness, this team, this watching out for other people, for each other. You're not great at that. So if you want to be great at everything, this is the next thing to be great at. And sometimes you can get people to go, oh, I could do that. And, sometimes not. I mean, I think, you never know. But I think that's the part of what we'll call non-authoritarian leadership that's really, really hard, is you have to be able to speak to 15, 20 different people in 15, 20 different ways. And that takes patience. It takes awareness. It takes talent. You have to have comedy. You have to have self-deprecation. You have to have sometimes authoritarian, like, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. You have to have all these different gears that you can use, or all these talents that you have. And the best leaders I've ever seen in my life are the people that have all of those gears to use, and they don't have to just, a lot of famous leaders in the past just had a big stick. It's fine, but I don't think there's abundance in it. And I think the people that I really respect are the people that are greatest athletes, emotional athletes, right? That could walk into a situation and say something funny about themselves just to break the ice, to get everybody kind of focused, or could make, take a good joke, or at the right time, Bill Walsh is a great example of this. He would, when we were practicing 49ers, if somebody made a mistake, quarterback made a bad mistake, he would turn and scream at the quarterback coach. Like, you are the worst coach. I can't believe that you failed this whole thing. Because what he's really saying, because they're going to go and laugh about it. What he doesn't want to yell at me or yell at Joe, but he's yelling at the coach, and then we're going to be thinking like, oh, he's yelling at the coach, which I appreciate, but he's really yelling at me. But then he's not yelling at me, which is nice. And so it's like these little techniques, that get the point across, get the thing that really needs to be known, but doesn't have to be so, damaging, right? So those are the kind of things.
Okay, so following that path of knowing how to deal with humans, not only people that work for you, but they also have the human side. So in order to be good at this, you need to be at a high level. You need to be a good leader. You need to have all these gears ready. So how you found that when you improve yourself as a person, or when you improve your relationship with God or relationship with the people that you love, you improve at being a leader, and you improve at being, you become more able to lead or better at it?
For sure.
Or perform.
I think that what you do is I think the highest form of that you're describing is when you can leave the transaction. When you're a leader who is selfless, it doesn't mean that you don't, aren't concerned about results or concerned about getting the right thing done. But it's the leadership. Most things happen by transaction. If you'll do this, I'll do that. It's like there's a contract in there. And I think the best way to lead is what I would call non-transactional, where as a leader, I'm super curious about you. I'm super curious about what incents you, what inspires you. I don't need anything. I'm not looking for anything. I'm just interested in what really makes a difference to you. What's the best you can be? And how can I see that vision? And then how can I articulate that to you? So it's not really about me. I'm a facilitator. And as I facilitate your vision for who you can be, what I'm doing is finding an inspiration. Like, oh my gosh, some of the best coaches I've ever had told me what I could be before I even thought I could be it. I'm like, how did you, I asked him later, how did you know? And it's like, I could just see it. And I just wanted you to know that was the potential you had in you. And so those are special people who they're visionary, right? The greatest leaders are visionary around the people that they're trying to help. And so in that way, it's not visionary about, it could be visionary about where we want to go, but it's not visionary about yourself. It's visionary about the people that you're around. That's when you always say, it never meant as much as what people said as how they made me feel. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, you could say anything, but how did you make me feel? And that's the description of something I would call a more sophisticated approach to leadership. And I think that's just over time, because when you're young, well, the way you guys are going, the way you're asking the questions, you'll get them much faster than I do, because you're super interested in it, which I appreciate.
So when you're leading in high level situations, whether that's in the NFL or that's in a private equity firm or in some sort of business setting, how important is it for the leader to be unwavering and solid when situations may be uncertain, versus being somewhat transparent and also maybe showing some emotion? Like, how in control of your emotions do you think you have to be in situations where pressure starts to get real?
I think it's really important that you, at key moments, are willing to speak the truest truth. Things have gone badly, or things are not going well. There's usually a lot of truth, a lot of things that have gone wrong. And as a leader, you can't be the person that's going to now speak the truth, which is all the things that went wrong. What you need to speak is the truest truth. Truest truth is, I'm the leader. It hasn't gone well. It's me. Yet, I want to iterate, and I want you to believe that I've seen the mistakes, and I still believe in the future. You have to reclaim, because if I'm going to beat people into submission to follow me, even if we get there, it won't be the fulfillment of what everybody wants. So it's a really tender thing, because you can't, if you want to lead, you got to have a plan. If the plan's not working, you can't just say, oh, it's your fault, you picked the wrong plan, because everyone knows you didn't pick the wrong plan, I picked the wrong plan. But you better have another plan, right? And so leadership's about iteration. Like, I always say this about finding out how good you can get in anything. Like, if the goal is to find out how good I can be, well, that's iterative. It doesn't mean I don't all of a sudden just do one thing and then all of a sudden I'm great. It's iterative. You've heard the great books about failure, and what is the book? Fail spectacularly, like almost encouraging failure. And that's the effort, right? The effort is to iterate, and I hopefully you're not saying that every time you fail as miserably as you did at the beginning. If you fail incrementally less, right? Because I'm getting smarter, I'm getting better, I'm getting more thoughtful, I'm getting more in tune with what I'm trying to do. And I think that's the same way about leadership is things are not going well. Speak to the truest truth. I'm the leader. I screwed it up, but I've seen this now. I have this. This is an even better way to do it. And let's see if we can send everybody to go try it again. That's how you keep your job on quarterbacking, is talk to people about the truest truth. Because what happens is when you speak the truest truth that I'm responsible, then everyone else can be responsible. Oh, but you know what? I did this thing or I did that thing. If you don't speak the truest truth and you just start to list the truths about the mitigating factors that happened, no one will be accountable. They'll always look back at you and say, well, it's your fault, because they're waiting for you to own it. Until you do, we're just muddling around in mitigation. And that's a terrible place to live.
So I want to ask you, moving on from that, reflecting on your career of football, has anything in your business career or outside football in general has brought as much anxiety and pressure as football did? And does your experience as a quarterback allows you to see certain situations now with a much more calm perspective? And if so, does that allow you to lead more effectively off the field?
Well, there's nothing as dramatic as 80,000 people watching a game over 3 hours with a score that you're going to be a win or lose.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty dramatic. Like, nothing else in life is that dramatic. My winning and losing at work or at home, my marriage or with the kids, is nothing's going to happen in 3 hours that's going to be that dramatic ever again. So that's a fact. So the anxiety and the pressure and all that, that's... Anyone says that, and the problem with a lot of guys who have lived in that environment, they leave that environment and want to recreate it somewhere else. Well, how are you possibly going to do that? It's going to be miserable, because there's no other place that's going to have a score, 80,000 people watching, and, it's just not going to be that dramatic. So quit trying to bring that pressure and anxiety and drama to something that's not there. Like, it was there, it was taught me a lot. I bring a lot with me now that I did it, to your point, but I don't want to, let's admit that it's not that. I will say that the sense of success, in my marriage or in my family or at work, today, it's more sublime, but it's more important. You know what I mean? It's like victories in the other bigger things in life, although hopefully not as dramatic, are certainly more declarative of my life's journey and what's more important. It's just that there's no score necessarily, and there's no witnesses, there's no 80,000 people, And so anyway, I think that it's important to just recognize that there's just two different environments, and that's okay.
Well, I know you had the opportunity to meet a lot of great leaders, great people like Bill Walsh, maybe Tom Brady, or another great leaders of organization. Who was your favorite, and why was that person, caught your attention about leading? What did they have that other people didn't?
Well, I talked about a little bit before. The greatest coaches, who are by definition leaders of the team, that I ever had were the visionaries. Bill Walsh was one of them. Lavelle Edwards in college was another one. Yeah, I remember him sitting me down. I was on my recruiting trip as a senior in high school. and telling me, look, I don't know where you're going to go to school, it might be here, but just so you know, I've watched the film and I can see that you could be really good at this. And I always told everyone, I'm going to be great, but I didn't really know, you know what I mean? It was like fake it till you make it a little bit, right? But here's someone who'd been around to be able to say, and I didn't necessarily believe him. I thought he was just saying that.
Very cool.
When I asked him later, I said, you know, did you really know? And he goes, I can see it, you know? And I think that visionary quality is something that you're born with. It's not something you can hone it and make it better. But I think people that lack the vision, you can work at it, but I think it's a gift.
Mm-hmm.
There's visionary gifts. And I really appreciate people who, and that's not visionary for themselves, it's visionary for other people. In other words, I can see how great you can be, you know, and not just say it, but like actually see it and then articulate it in a way and then teach it and show it, you know. So that's the best.
So to start closing the this episode, it's been great to learn about you.
You guys are great.
One extra question? Do you have one?
Yeah, I can ask one more.
Or how you going to do this?
Yeah, we did all of it.
You're going good with time?
Okay. Go ahead.
So one question kind of talking about being a leader or being part of a team that's either wants to perform at a high level or is already performing at a high level. What are some daily routines or weekly routines or monthly routines, for that matter, that you found are critical that you might do outside of, you know, practice or the office that help you stay focused, stay sharp, perform at your best? Is there anything that you've been able to take from being an athlete, from being in the NFL, and apply that to
the best thing? This is probably the best thing in the whole podcast is this principle. Bill Walsh, the Hall of Fame coach, first practice of the first training camp of the year, the first year that I was there, it was before practice, and he had us in an auditorium and was basically saying hello to everybody and, you know, welcome. And he said, the number one thing I want to get accomplished this year, and you'd think he would say Super Bowl, right? Or championship, but he said, I want you guys to develop an element of love for each other. And that's the most important thing that we have to do. And I was like, I don't know, it seemed weird. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't expect that. And then he described it as shared common experiences amongst each other, that he wanted to get away from our comfort zones and have us spend time at lunches, in hotels, in planes, locker rooms, making sure that we're spending the time with everybody. In other words, there's 50 guys. How do you get to know 50 people? Like usually what happens is you got 10 guys you know, and 20 guys you kind of know, and 20 guys you know their name because it's on the back of their jersey, but you don't know them. Mm-hmm. He wanted you to have that feeling of your 10 closest friends. He wanted, 50 guys feel like that at all times. And his principle was, and he said it right there, that I think we're going to be at a big game in Lambeau Field against the Packers, and it's sleeting rain, freezing cold, down by 4, 3rd and 10, with a minute and a half left. And I guarantee you, I don't care what play I call. What will matter is that you guys in the huddle look at each other, and there's this connectivity that can't be done there. You can be desperate for it right there, but it's the work has to be done before. Okay. And so you talk about things off the field, things that really matter. It's really relationships. And it seems soft and not really that, more esoteric. It's not as in the dirt. But in the end, if we can, because if I have spent the time with you and we've connected in a way that like we've got a friendship, and he talked about love for each other, like a real respect for each other. And even though different personalities and the ones that are more egocentric and the ones that weren't, and like, we just have this, what it does is it creates an environment where it's critical that we're together. Mm-hmm. Those moments when it's just vital. You can't draw on the play that we're going to call, that we're going to run it perfectly, more than we can draw on the relationship. And that's why Fortnite were good for 20 years. You think, why? Well, yeah, there's a lot of really talented people, but there's a lot of talented people all over the league. Why were the 49ers great 20 straight years? 20 over everybody. There it is.
why does that connectivity when you're in the huddle make you better? Like when you feel surrounded by like-minded humans that have the same goal and the same purpose?
Because anything, what happens is you're not as selfish. Not only in a bad way, just like you're in a pressure situation. You're saying, "Oh, I don't want to screw up. I don't want to screw up. I don't want to screw up." Rather than I am even thinking about that. I'm thinking about the play itself and all the things that we got to do together and my piece in it. And it's a freeing. It frees people so that it's not, you're not 11 individuals, right? You're like, because we're together, we know we're accountable to each other. And we know that I've fought with you and I know you're alike. And I know that I'm not going to be shamed if something goes wrong. I know that if something goes haywire, I'm not gonna get blamed for solely. Like, all these things that happen when you're separate. All of a sudden you're together, and now all of a sudden you're a 3rd and 10, a minute and a half to go, and fleeting rain is like I'm free. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything in my mind that's negative. It's like it's this we're one. I think that's what the relationship does.
Nice. You want to close it?
Feel free to approach this next question in any way you want. Could be family, could be sports, could be business, could be religion. It's more of a take the floor question. And if you want to add anything extra to close the episode, please go ahead. Feel free to do so. The last question is this. What legacy do you hope to leave behind?
That question came up recently. There's a volunteer group that goes out around the world for 15 to 8-year-old kids and the 18-year-old kids that young men and women all over. They have places all over the world that go service projects, and they have group leaders that are like 20 to 24 that are the group leaders that'll go out and spend the 2 or 3 weeks in the summertime, 3 or 4 groups. So these group leaders, 20 to 24-year-olds, I'm inspiring, trying to give them a sense of what's most important. And what I was describing to him is the same kind of leadership where it's selfless, it's non-transactional, it's catapulting myself into people's lives to try to see if I can find a way to be visionary in their lives. And I finished the speech, and one of the guys asked the question, he said, "Steve, it's easy for you to talk like this because you've already accomplished everything. You have all these trophies, you have championships, you have Super Bowl rings. Like, yeah, if I had all that, I'd be thinking about this kind of stuff. But I'm 20 years old. I haven't done anything. And I don't know in my life that I'm ever going to do anything like that. And so I don't know that I'm going to have legacy. So now what do you tell me? Is it the same story that you just told?" And I said, well, I find it very interesting because this is my answer to him. I said, the longer I live, the more I realize that my legacy is this visionary healing, this goodness and wellness and even love that I can bring to people's lives. That measure of the healing that I can bring to others is really the legacy that I have. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, I'm starting later because I didn't realize it till later. But it's not going to be the trophies. It's going to be, my legacy is going to be this. And you're 20 years old. You get a lifetime of it. So you actually you have a better chance at legacy than I do. And flipping that on his head, he really appreciated that, because the truth is, if I'm right, then let's get about building that legacy in that spirit of abundance, in that sense of, and that's as true in any religion as it is in life or in families or work or anywhere else. It's the truth. And so I find myself trying to catch up on a legacy that I should have been building my whole life. But it's a fun time. Yeah. You guys are great. I really appreciate you're very earnest. You know what I mean? Like, you really, like, some people are doing things because, again, they want to look cool or they want to think that it's something cool. I think you guys are actually doing it to learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, you asking the questions, you're like, I'm interested in the answer.
100%, yeah.
And that's not always the case. So that's how you do it.
Who better to learn?
Interested in what? But I really appreciate you guys are, and checking it out, and I'm glad I could be a part of it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.